Hi Ram,
Hello,
welcome to Sudeep Audio's YouTube channel.
my pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for your time and a quick introduction to how you became a musician.
I've been composing songs since I was 10 years old. Yeah, and I have like a bunch of songs that I wrote between the age of 10 and 12, and my father still has kept very
Were these
sweetly.
tunes? Or
Tunes and words, music and lyrics. Yeah, and because I come from a South Indian background, there's certain things you have to do. So I learned like about 8 to 9 years of Carnatic vocal, and then I did 3 years of Hindustani vocal. Then I did 1 year of piano training as well. But the piano thing was more because I already figured that I was going to become a composer, so I wanted to learn how to read and write music. So there was more a theory class than really playing, but I did learn playing as well. Um, yeah, so I started composing songs almost instinctively when I was 10 years old. I didn't know I wanted to become a composer, but I knew I had this urge to write songs.
what kind of songs were these?
These were songs that I
Because at
don't know. I
that
think
age, it's really kind of unique to kind of.
no, actually, I'll tell you what. There's a lot of songwriters who start off very young. One of the reasons why you get into songwriting is because I think it starts fascinating you after a while. Like for me, my first toy as a child was an LP player. So I had an LP player and I had about 20 LPs that were my favorite toys. So I used to put them on, and by the age of 3, I used to put them on myself, and I knew how to, to put the needle on
Yeah.
the right track. And so for me, it was always, and the LPs themselves were very fascinating for me because I loved looking at the back and studying the LPs and seeing who's done what, and there were so many credits, and I would read all the credits, and like I got to know the names of people like George Martin and Jeff Emerick, who used to work on the Beatles records. Jeff Emerick being the engineer and George Martin being the producer. um, and the awareness from that age that the producer does something different from the engineer, and the string arrangements were done by somebody, and so I was fascinated by this whole world
At this young
of,
age.
yeah. So I was like, kind of, this was like my fantasy world. I would look at these album sleeves, and some of them had the entire band sitting in front of an SSL console, and kind of kind of observing the mix and looking at each other, and fascinating world. I was very fascinated by this world. I was really in love with it, and as a result of which, when I reached the age of about 10, I don't think I could hold myself back anymore. I just started writing songs, and I didn't have an instrument at home, so it would be like odd kind of demos, of me kind of wobbling into cassette recorders and stuff like that. So by the time I got to the age of about 15, I was in college by then. I'd gotten into R.A. Podar College. I was in commerce. I chose commerce for a very specific reason because I knew I wanted to become a composer by then. I was very sure I wanted to become a composer. And
And
by
you have
the
no, sorry, I mean, your family has no background
no,
in.
no, no, my family has no background in
But
music. My dad's not.
you still were so sure that.
Yeah, because also the thing is, it was a very good household to grow up in, musically, because I heard a lot of music. I mean, I don't know too many other human beings on this planet who must have heard as much music as I do.
Uh-huh.
I don't take pride in much else, but I take a lot of pride in the fact that I've heard an obscene amount of music. One of the most beautiful things about our household was that there was music on all the time. Like most people have the TVs on in their houses, and a lot of people you'll find have like this background sound of television or things like that.
Correct.
In our household, even today, it's not the television that's on, it's the music system that's on all the time.
Like while having dinner or
All the time, from the time you wake up. I mean, we used to wake up to the Vishnu Sahasranamam, and after that there would be like a whole bunch of, like, there would be Carnatic music playing, and then there would be like um, you know uh, my mother was really heavily into Hindi film music, so she would play a lot of Hindi film music, and my dad was heavily into Carnatic and Hindustani, and he went. I think every Indian goes through, especially if his generation went through this ghazal phase. So we heard a lot of ghazals at one point, and of course rock music, and his fascination with rock music and jazz. So it's a crazy it's a beautiful childhood.
So like you're breathing air and music together in the house.
Yeah, at the same time, it felt like that. It was really nice. It was a beautiful, it was beautiful childhood.
So, I mean, you said during your BCom days, did you start?
Yeah, I became a professional composer by the time I was in my 12th standard. Yeah, I spent the entire 11th and 12th standard looking for work.
So, what did you do for getting work and did
Yeah,
you
I was
start?
I was lucky because what happened is, the satellite boom had just happened. So there was a lot of content being generated, and not that many professional young composers. Excuse me. One of the interesting things that was happening at that point was that people cast you almost by age. Like there were these young shows happening, and a lot of young flavor. And there was the time of Yahi Hai Right Choice Baby and all that stuff. And there was this kind of new India emerging, and we had a certain kind of dearth of young people in the business. So I was one of those people who got cast very fortunately by people, because I just looked almost too young to be given work.
You
I
still
was
do.
too young.
You still do.
I was too young
Okay.
at that point. I really was, and it was interesting because they would give me work and I had no gear. So I would go out very confidently looking for work, and I had absolutely no gear. And the truth is, and this is the frightening aspect of it, I knew how much it would take to kind of get into it professionally, because I used to fantasize about MIDI gear. Those days, I'm talking about 92, 93. A keyboard, just owning a keyboard with a sequencer was like $1.50 and
At that time.
at that time, and it was a lot of money, and it was a frightening investment to be able, for a middle class family to make. And from school, I used to make these trips to actually, this is how far back we go. I used to make these trips to Salim Merchant and Salim and Suleiman's father's office in Masjid. From school I used to go there. I used to actually go there. Sometimes I used to go there with my dad. Sometimes I used to go there alone without my parents knowing. I used to actually catch a bus from Chembur, and I used to go to Masjid just to be able to look at those keyboards and touch them. And at one point I remember uncle, and this was one of the sweetest things that happened. Again, that's one of the reasons why Mr. Merchant is such an important and is somebody I'll always have the highest regard and respect for. Is at one point he told my father कि इसको जुनून है, he said कि आप खरीद लो जल्दी क्योंकि इसको जुनून है, ये तो घर छोड़ देगा ऐसे. और जुनूनी जो लोग हैं उनको आप रोक नहीं सकते, तो आप इसको प्लीज कुछ कीजिए, इसको खरीद के दे दीजिए now. And I'm telling you right now, I've not too many kids have this kind of fire, so make the decision and go for it. So it was very sweet of him, and he was very encouraging. I used to go there, and I used to sit in their office, and I used to. It's a stupid thing to do when you're a kid. You shouldn't be catching buses and going halfway across the city to to touch a keyboard.
Right.
But I was doing that. I was that crazy. I was a bit psychotic. So my parents finally made that call, and kind of we sold some jewelry and this that, and they got me a keyboard, and that's how I started. When I was that's how I got my first equipment. I got my first semi-professional keyboard from a guy called Devesh Pandya, I think, from Ghatkopar. I mean, it was like that. I remember.
Which
literally,
brand or model was this, if you
this
remember?
was a PSR something, Yamaha PSR 2000, I think. I mean, ages ago, and a very basic keyboard, very basic. I mean, my parents really struggled to kind of to encourage me, but they did everything they could. They really did everything they could. And after that, I realized that the only way to actually fund this was when I was in college. I realized the only way to actually fund this is to make some money.
Right.
So I had the most basic semi-professional keyboard, and I started sequencing on it, and I started making demos on it, and I realized the magical world of MIDI is just too far away. It's just too expensive. So I started getting work, and I would take it to guys like Tubby, Indrajit Sharma, and Salim. They were really, really helpful when I was starting out. I would take the work to them, and they would sequence it for me, and then we would go to a studio and we would track it, and it was a trip. It was a real trip, and it was a pain in the ass as well, because it was a lot of work, to kind of block dates with someone as busy as Tubby was. We were all the same age, by the way. I mean, we were all like by and large in the same generation.
Right.
And it's one of the reasons why we still have a really strong bond, is because we don't forget where we come from, and we don't forget where we come from. We've all really, really worked for a year so that we can buy one piece of equipment. I mean, today Omnisphere does all of that and more, and and it's like it's really, really well priced. It's ridiculously well priced, and you can run it off a laptop. And in those days,
An
that
iPad also now.
it's ridiculous. I mean, it's ridiculous how far technology has gone. Those days, that was 2 years' work. You know,
Correct.
those days it was literally 2 years' work. It was
But
like,
in a way that formed a foundation for you in
yes, of course it did. I mean, it made me
for your
respect.
future.
It made me respect not only the value of friendships and the value of integrity within the business, but also it made me. It gives me a different perspective on software as well. You know, I mean, because we come from that generation, like. You know as well. I mean, you know what software I use because I buy everything from you. But you also know that I don't buy everything.
Everything.
I buy what I need, and I'll go after it, and I'll look into it, and I'll get my chops together, and I'll listen to all the demos, and I'll download the demos, I'll use it for a while, and I'll be satisfied, and then I'll come to you and I'll say, this is what I want, and I need it. I need this, you know. And that is the kind of that is the learning that I think our generation has over the generations that's come straight into software. You know, that's come like
They want
directly into
everything.
the software. Yeah, they want everything, and nothing really is valuable. You know, I mean, in that sense, it's almost a luxury of excess.
Yeah, and many want it for free. So
Yeah, that's
That's
a
another story.
whole other trip. Yeah, that's a whole other trip. You know, nothing in life. If you want anything in life for free, then expect everything that you do to be taken for free as well.
yeah,
That's just a fact.
that's true.
And we learned. I mean, one of the things that I learned very early is to respect myself and to respect the work that I do enough to be able to kind of to stand up for it, to back it, and to fight for it. And that was one of the most interesting things that happened at that point. Is I learned. Not only did I learn composition, which I was already into from a very young age, but I learnt how to interact with other musicians and composers, because I was working with minds the same generation, minds of my age. I mean, guys like right across the board. I mean, I remember when I had first gone to Tubby's place to sequence a piece, and this is my first big job. I got to compose the music for Femina Miss India when I was about 17, and it was a lot of music. It was 40 minutes of music. That was the year that Aishwarya and Sushmita won. So that was my first big job.
And your contribution?
Oh man, yeah. I always keep telling, I used to keep telling Times of India that I'm your lucky charm, and it was very interesting because I used to keep going to their homes to sequence stuff, and I remember both Salim and Tubby first introducing me to the world of sampling, and Salim used to sample on his K2000, and Tubby had the S760, and for the first time, we used to Salim used to tell me, man, check this out, check the sample out, and we'll take this from the CD, from this audio CD, and we'll sample it over here, and then we can process it, and it was such a fascinating world, and it was so beautiful that we were so open with the information. None of it was like, oh, it's my secret, and I'm going to keep it, and you won't know about it. It was never like that. It was so beautiful and so generous. So check this out. Have you seen this, dude? And you see how this is going to change music. It was like that, It was a beautiful phase. It was a magical phase, and also it gave me gear lust like never before. So I started after I finished Femina Miss India. We did all the tracking at Dinsha Sanjana's studio in Cuff Parade. He had a home studio, and he had the first digital studio in the city. It was a spectral digital tracking system, and so when we got into that, when I first saw that, and I went to Dinsha's place and I saw this digital tracking system, I was like, hey man, this is an incredible piece of technology, digital, and we can record straight without any board. We can go straight in from the mic pre into the recorder, and this pristine sound, and you can move tracks around and stuff. This is in another world. This is pre-Pro Tools. Pro Tools was then Sound Designer. It was a 2-track software. So you see how old I actually am. So it was a fascinating time, and I started working at Dinsha's place. After the Miss India job, I started working at Dinsha's place, and the deal was that I would be the in-house engineer cum programmer in the daytime, and at night I would get to learn the gear and use it for my own stuff. So I was working from 10 o'clock in the morning, from the time the studio started, till 4 o'clock in the morning the next day.
Wow.
So yeah, I did that schedule for about 9 to 10 months. I was working 6 to 7 days a week, all day and all night, and it was like a fire. I was working my guts off, and I was in college. I was never in college. I was always at work, and it was a beautiful time because what happened was I got to work with my first sequencer. Then I got to work with Atari, the Atari sequencing software, and there were all these modules and keyboards, and it was a superb time because I actually got to use that gear for my own work as well. Dinsha was generous enough to allow me to do that. So that was my first kind of time of having some gear. It felt like I had some gear. From there, when I left Dinsha's place, I had enough money to buy myself. Dinsha helped me get a loan on a TS10, so I bought my TS10, and I moved out of there. And a lot of people helped me. I mean, Sanjay Maru helped me. He used to rent me his gear when I didn't have gear. He used to rent me his. He had an Ensoniq. What was that sampling module? ASR10. Yeah, you remember the ASR10? So he had the ASR10 module. So I used to sequence on the module. Okay, so it was another world. It was a whole other world. So it was crazy. It was a crazy time. It was a mad nutcase time to get into the industry, and it was also the most beautiful time because um, you were seeing in technology getting cheaper. I was seeing it happening in front of me. I was seeing the first soft synths emerge. So when I made some money, that's where Shan and I became friends as well. Shan at Dinsha's place, and we struck a friendship, and we decided we're going to work together and we're going to do some stuff together. So then I started stepping out doing commercials. I started getting commercials because of Din's contact, because of Dinsha's place, and the people who had seen me work over there. When I left Dinsha's and I started doing my own thing, I started getting clients and clientele who would give me small work and let me kind of do these small jingles and commercials and stuff. I did a TV serial then called Film Devane. I mean, this is like really really old, and
Doordarshan days.
no. This was the first. This was on Z.
Satellite?
This was on Z. This was on Z.
Satellite days.
Yeah, the beginning of satellite.
Beginning.
Just the beginning of the satellite era. So yeah, so all of this. I mean, just trying to find work all the time, getting thrown out of advertising agencies.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I got thrown out of at least 3 advertising agencies for being too young.
Oh.
Yeah, they just look at me and they just be like, no, you should be assisting somebody. And I was like, I just assisted somebody for 2 years. I mean, I've been assistant all this time. Let me at least get some work now. And then I met 2 gentlemen who gave me work when I was not even a major then. I was 17, and it was Chax and Aggie who were in Leo Burnett at that point. Now that time it was called Chaitra, and I'm still working with them.
Oh.
And I did the Docomo track for Chax, and I did Har Friend Zaruri Hota Hai for Aggie. So we're still working together. They were very sweet to me. What they did was they used to give me scratches, for tracks and for small commercials, and they would say like, you do the scratch, and if it's good, then we'll pitch it to the client, and then the track is yours, and you've got it. So that was a difficult time as well, because I used to get 1 hour of studio time to do the entire jingle, to record the scratch. Sometimes I used to get 1 hour of studio time to record 2 scratches, and I'm talking about recording the track, recording the vocal, and mixing the track.
Everything.
Yeah, in 1 hour. So it used to be, and including tracking the entire track. So it used to be I learned to work really fast, and I learned to sequence efficiently. I learned my gear really well. I knew, all the segregation would be done at home, and we would literally go in and we would time ourselves by the second, and we'd plug all the gear in, and the tracking would be done, and and the vocalist would be on standby, and the vocalist would be trained at home. It was an amazing time. It was great fun. It made me very alert, and it made me value studio time. I also learned how to work on a mix very quickly. What I wanted from a mix. So I learned terminology of studio terminology, how much compression I wanted, what exactly, and it was a great time. I would also what I would also do is I would also cut the edits on my sequencer, so that we didn't have to waste time in the studio editing the track down to like, suppose you needed a 25 seconder or out of a 30 or a 15 seconder. I would actually sequence the 15 seconder, and I would come completely ready. So it was a superb time. It was a great time of learning, great time of kind of getting your chops together. And then I got my first sampler. I got my second keyboard. Then it was growth from there. Well, I got to tell you, Loveology, the first album that I did with Shan, was entirely one keyboard.
Oh, okay. Tanadil was not the first.
No, no, no. We did Loveology. We did Loveology when I must have been 18. Shan must have been 21 or something. We were kids. We were just very, very young and very stupid. We did it for no money. And I used to sequence it at home. And we used to run into the studio and record it and finish the whole album that way. But one keyboard. The whole record is done with one keyboard. That was the starting. That was the starting of the entire scene. By the time we reached Tanhadil, I had a lot more gear. I had bought gear and I had a mixer at home and all of that stuff. Yeah, so it was a spectacular time. It was great. And by the time I reached Tanhadil, the most amazing part was I had already done another record called Colorblind, an English record, and the Colorblind was sequenced completely on a keyboard. By the time I reached Tanhadil, I had my first Cubase a sequencer computer. I had soft synths. I had bought Cubase and Wavelab. I had the one of the first official original copies of Orange Vocoder. So yeah, it was superb. I was seeing technology get cheaper and cheaper, and I knew that at one point all of these keyboards and all are just going to go completely into this one computer. So that that kind of relief, that phase, gave me great faith that that technology is going to get cheaper and cheaper, and music is going to get easier and easier to make. Little did I know that music is going to, people are going to start asking for music for free. I did not expect the music business to crumble the way it did, but it was fun. It was a lot of fun. I think musicians today, in fact, young composers today, have it very easy. You can start off with next to nothing.